And we are back. Joining me now is Vonda Pelto. She's author of Without Remorse. She was hired by LA County to keep some of the country's most notorious serial killers alive. Pleasure to have you here today, Vonda.
You too?
Well, you know, I think some of us often feel that we've worked with serial killers, but you actually did work with serial killers.
I actually did. real live ones.
So you were hired to keep these guys alive. Why was it so important to keep them alive? People would think, who cares?
Yeah. I have to admit, at times I didn't care either. But one of the Freeway Killers, Vernon Butts, killed himself in the jail. He hung himself. And that was before he could testify against the man they wanted most, which was William Bonin. He was the head man. And as a result, the mental health unit in the jail was very embarrassed. The sheriff were really under the gun by the attorney general because now, of course, he couldn't testify. I was brand new out of a Ph.D., no license yet, and I went to mental health and said I need a job. Jobs were tight. And they said, well, we're going to create a job for you.
Have we got a job for you?
Have you? Come on in, you sweet little thing, you. Naive sweet little thing. And so they hired me in, and then my assignment was to see anybody who came through the jail who was newsworthies. So that was not only serial killers, but people like John Holmes, the porn star, and Arthur Jackson, the man who tried to kill Teresa Saldana. And
so, but people who were either accused of murder or suspected of some very serious.
Exactly.
So what were these guys like? I mean, what amazed me was that they weren't in handcuffs most of the time. They were walking around. I guess they'd handcuff them to the chair sometimes when they brought them into you, but I'm just amazed that you were just, as you said, a sweet young thing working around all these killers.
Yeah. When I first went in, I was really very, very frightened and had horrible nightmares. And the first man I saw was the trash bag murderer. And the deputy said to me, hey doc, you want me to handcuff him down? And I said, yeah. But his chair was this simple little, you know, very lightweight chair, and they cuffed one hand down to the arm of the chair, and that was it. And my office was a converted cell. And so I was here, the desk was here, and there were two chairs here, and then the wall. And I thought to myself, hey, you know, what is this? Aren't they going to shackle him or do something with him? No, just this simple one hand.
And these are cold-blooded killers.
Cold-blooded, yeah.
But it was interesting, though, you said, though, that in the end, at least, I mean, it didn't turn out to be as much of a problem because these people, these weren't necessarily the psychotics who would attack you and jump you. I mean, they'd kill you, but they're more manipulative or like low-key. They're not going to just jump on you. They had more of a method to what they did.
Yeah, of all of the serial killers I worked with, none were psychotic. Which is very different than what Patty experienced. Right.
Now, I wonder, because when Patty, again, you hear that. Could you tell, you know, well, some of these guys you said you would have dated.
Oh, I would have. The first day I walked into the jail, I saw Ken Bianchi on the telephone, which turned out to be right beside my office. And I said to the deputy, hey, who's that? Because I thought everybody in the jail was going to look mean and surly. And so here he is, this good-looking dude. I'm single, divorced, couple of kids, and kind of a horny little chick. And I thought, you know, he's really cool. And the deputy said, oh, that's Ken Bianchi, the Hillside Strangler. And I thought, my word, I'm a psychologist, but I couldn't tell serial killers. I had absolutely no idea.
Now, you didn't date him?
No, I didn't. No, thank God. But had I met him at a bar, I would have. Because you can't tell.
You can't tell.
These guys are smooth. They're sociopathic. And by definition, they have no empathy for other human beings. And they have no guilt or remorse about whatever they do.
And you felt like sometimes they were kind of working on you some?
Oh, absolutely. Ken Bianchi would come up and he'd put his hand on my shoulder and say, oh, Doc, you shouldn't work so hard. And after my father died, Ken was so solicitous. He would come up and say, Doc, how's your mom doing? I know that's really got to be hard for her with your father gone.
But yet, on a certain level, you actually did kind of get to like some of these guys? I mean, did you see them as human beings, or were they Or not? Were they too far gone that, you know, you were just being played? Or, I mean, how did you actually feel an attachment to them?
Yeah, and I think that that's how sometimes some of the jail personnel will become attached to some of these inmates and help them get out. Because in order to work with these guys 8 hours a day, every day, you have to separate out, compartmentalize what they've done and what they're really like, and then you only see their human side.
Even though you knew that if they ever got you outside the prison, you might very
There was
well
a good
end up being one of their
possibility.
victims.
Sure,
So.
sure.
But, you know, I have to say, I love the quote, though, where
Oh.
toward the end when you left, or, you know, when the job was kind of going downhill, you had a new boss, you said you actually liked some of the serial killers better than your boss.
Oh, better, I did. I mean,
what does that say? You know,
Whoopsie.
when you like the serial killers better than your boss, you
well,
know there's
there
a problem,
came a
right?
point when my new boss came in. It was no longer a psychologist. It was now a social worker, and I was a Ph.D. And I don't know, maybe there was a little rivalry there or something. But he told me I could no longer see any of the serial killers. And so I would sneak down and see Ken Bianchi. Anyway, my office was there on the second floor with all the killers. And so I would just walk down to Ken's office and chat with him. And I said to my boss, Ken still wants to see me because he's, you know, it's comfortable and gets him out of the cell. That's also reality. And my boss said, if his attorney okays it, you can. So Ken wrote to the attorney said sure, and my boss still said no. So then you know, totally bizarre. Then Ken Bianchi, the Hillside Strangler, and I had this little joke running. I mean, that is bizarre. I don't care how you look at it. Well, I got to tell you a funny story.
Sure.
I had one time the trash bag murderer in my office. He's the guy, one of the guys who chopped up the bodies in the Bonaventure Hotel, and then they carried them out in hefty bags in suitcases, and then they disposed of these suitcases all over LA. And the joke around the jail was that Hefty Bag was going to come and see if they could get an endorsement from the trash bag murderers that they were leak-proof. Now that's sick. But when you work in a jail or you work in that kind of situation, you develop an extremely sick sense of humor.
Twisted sense of humor.
Yes.
We'll pick up on that in a second. We'll be right back. And we are back with Vonda Pelto and Patty Malone. Well, it got to the point where, I mean, well, you were just used to being called every name in the book when you went to work, right?
Yes.
That's just...
Yeah. Can I use the initials?
Sure.
I always thought my middle name started with B and my first name started with F. And that wasn't only from the deputies and the inmates.
Oh.
Both of them.
Both. In fact, can I say that you started saying in the green room, sometimes you didn't think there was much difference between the deputies and the prisoners.
That's true. You know, I could swear that if I had ever done the MMPI, it's a big personality test, on the deputies and the inmates, that the profiles would be so similar, it would be frightening. Mm-hmm. One just had the big flashlight they used for flashlight therapy, which were the deputies, and the others were the inmates.
Oh, they're going to love us at the Sheriff's Department now.
I know, I was thinking, oh my goodness.
But they say though often that people who go into law enforcement have some kind of issues or like control or something that they're working on.
And you know, they do all kind of personality tests. I'm trying to cover my CYA right now. They do all kind of tests, and they do try to weed out any inmates that have a propensity toward violence. But you can't, none
inmates
of us
or deputies?
Oh, I'm sorry. That was a Freudian slip.
They're both in the jail, what can I say, you know?
The deputies, they do try to weed out.
They try. The ones they do weed out, they become inmates.
Right. That's right, they just step over that line and off they go.
But so how does this change you? Again, there you are, this sweet young thing being called a F, you know, whatever, every single day. How does it change you as a person?
Well, I went in as this sweet Southern Baptist girl. I was a virgin when I married at 18, and I was straight arrow. And when I came out after 3 years, I totally believed in the death penalty. I didn't believe in salvation for them anymore. I was Baptist, you know. And
because initially when you went in, sometimes there was a tendency, maybe, am I right, that you were, maybe you felt a little sympathy or felt like maybe they were innocent or they couldn't possibly have done that.
Exactly.
But then toward the end you were kind of like, no,
they
try
did.
'em.
Well, the first person I saw, I went to my boss and told him, I don't think this guy should be in the jail and tried for this because he really is innocent.
He told me.
He told me.
Didn't do it.
And he was just at the wrong place at the wrong time, for goodness sakes. And so, should I go and talk to the attorney or something? And my boss kind of mentally patted me on the top of the head and said, I wouldn't do that, Vonda. You know, it's better, the legal system will take care of it. And so I thought, oops.
And then, as I say,
Yeah.
toward the end, that when you heard some of the really horrific things and people who even admitted that they did it,
Right.
then that really, now, was there something, again, people always wonder, you know, is there something different? Was it just a con game? They were pretending to be crazy? Or were they really just, you know, something was missing? There were those few screws just gone.
I think it's genetic. I really honestly do. I think that they're born with some kind of genetic predisposition toward this behavior, and then predicated upon the type of upbringing they have, they're more apt to really act out or not.
Act out. And in fact, in your case too, Patty, or the guy that you'd been dating, there were plenty, or several instances where he had medical supervision, or he was on
That's
medication.
Right. That's right.
They released him.
They released him from the mental hospital saying that he was not a danger.
And his mother took him off of psychotic medication.
Yeah, that's right. She weaned him off of the psychotic medication, and I guess she didn't think he was a danger either, although I don't know how she could think that, given that he killed her cat and did some other things as well.
Mother's denials.
Right.
They
Well,
don't believe it.
You always hear on the news of like, not my little boy, or he
Right.
wouldn't
Exactly.
do that,
Yeah,
you
he
know, no
wouldn't
matter
do
what they
that.
were
Yeah.
accused of.
Yeah,
but-
well, and that was certainly the case with these guys. They were absolutely charming.
Yeah.
And Ken Bianchi was such a sweetheart. William Bonin, the one who killed 21 young boys, along with 4 other people he recruited to help him, I asked him one evening, how did it feel when you killed a boy? And the boy was crying and pleading, 12 years old, pleading, don't kill me, I won't talk. And Bonin said, you know, I didn't feel anything. And I said, well, was it like killing an animal? And he said, no, Doc, I got more feeling for an animal.
More for the animal. And if really, and what some of them even got a twisted or pleasure out of it or enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
Well, and the thing serial killers do is they start off at a lower level, and oftentimes they'll pick the person up and they'll maybe rape them and kill them. But then after a while, that's boring. And so then they will move up to torture because it's not exciting enough anymore simply to kill them.
Isn't that what Kenneth Bianchi did?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He and Angelo Buono, yeah, they started off just raping.
Right. Yeah.
And then they moved up. They started off actually as a revenge kind of situation. One of the prostitutes they had turned against them and made them really angry, and so they decided to make an example of her. And they killed her, and that was the first, and that's how they got into that.
well, and some of the killers will, you know, well, again, kind of going back to the idea of genetic or not, the idea that, you know, the bad childhood. I mean, do you really, you know, is that an excuse that they
No,
had a bad
absolutely
childhood?
not.
And that's
Absolutely not. There are tons and hundreds of kids who've had horrible childhoods, but they don't go out and kill.
Patty, how did
Right.
this change your opinion of, or maybe you as a person going through this, or you're,
It was really disturbing to me. It made me very sad because I couldn't understand how somebody could just change like that so completely drastically in such a short period of time. And I was looking for an explanation, and I did talk to several people about it. And several people said, and I don't think, just like you don't think the childhood thing's an excuse, drugs, you know, that he used drugs, he was involved in drugs. But hey, a lot of people were involved in drugs during those time periods, and they didn't turn into serial killers. So I don't see that as being anything other than looking for an excuse either. So I don't know, but it really disturbed me. It really bothered me. It made me very sad.
well, in our
Yeah.
final minute here, since you dated someone who turned out to be a killer, and you said you could very easily have imagined yourself on to dating someone, what advice would you have for women out there who, how do you know? If and that's people's worst fear. What if the guy's a serial killer? What do you do?
You've got to be extremely careful. And I think the best thing to do is, as a single woman, to date somebody that's recommended by friends. And oftentimes, if you'll just take your friend around and let them meet your friends, your new boyfriend, other friends can pick up what you can't in a person. Because you're enamored with the person and you want to date them.
And you're not objective.
But exactly. Very good point, Pat. Yeah.
Patty, anything you want to add to that?
I think that people should definitely be careful because you don't know who you're getting involved with. And I do want to say that, yes, some of the ones that I covered, like Daryl Rich, he was very charming too. He's somebody I would have talked to in a bar if I had met him that way. But instead, I was shooting video of him being led into the court while he yelled at me and was making all kinds of threats and that type of thing.
Terrible things.
Yeah, you got to be careful, absolutely.
Well, thank you both very much. Vonda Pelto. Vonda's book is Without Remorse, and I'm just destroying the set here. Thank you very much,
It's
Patty
great to be here. Thank
former
you.
TV news anchor and communications professor. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.